speak actually at the business school often, like in the MBA lecture series a lot. This is the first time I've actually spoken at an engineering or even in the computer science department at BYU. But sometimes they ask you to give a history of kind of yourself and talk about your background and what you've done and what you've learned. And I find an interesting way to talk about that is just to talk about all the mistakes I've made and all the different things I've tried to do and what I learned from those, and maybe I can help you avoid some of those. As a YSA bishop, I'd often say you can learn in two ways. You can learn by experience or by obedience. But either way, you're going to do it. Obedience is always the easier path, but experience, you learn a lot too. And so hopefully you can learn from other people's bad experiences. But I'm going to talk about this a little bit. I do want to say the biggest issue about mistakes are not bad. It's just what you learn from the mistake and whether you change what you do that makes the biggest difference in the results you get in your life. We're all going to have missteps. We're all going to do things wrong. And if you let that defeat you, you won't make it to the next thing you want to do. But if you learn from it, you actually learn even more. Also, if you're so afraid of making mistakes that you never try anything bold or scary, you can still live a happy life and raise some kids and have a good life, but I think life is better when you're willing to try things you're not comfortable with and when you try new things. And entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. It's been what it was for me, but it's not for everybody. But try bold things, try scary things, do things. Even in engineering, trying that thing that doesn't make sense and is a little bit scary is a great way to learn and grow. So what is an entrepreneur? It's funny, I grew up so focused on kind of tech entrepreneurship and doing those kinds of things. And by the way, in my day, when I graduated from BYU, there were basically 3 big tech companies in Utah. And there might have been some smaller ones, but the ones everyone knew about were WordPerfect and Novell and Evans and Sutherland. It wasn't what it is today, this whole ecosystem of Silicon Slopes and all these companies. That didn't exist. And at that time, if you took Novell and WordPerfect were not combined, but if you combined them, they were bigger than Microsoft. So it was a very, very big company. And so software is a big deal. But I sometimes think of that when I think of entrepreneurs, but the truth is, anyone who owns a restaurant or a dry cleaner or a retail store or a manufacturer or a taco cart is an entrepreneur, right? And so there's lots of different ways to be an entrepreneur. And if that floats your boat, doctors and lawyers and dentists and consultants that have their own practices that don't work for a big firm, those are all entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of different paths to be an entrepreneur. I actually had this bug early on. My first actual commercial product, and my dad's sitting here, so he might not even remember this, but I learned how to build electronics when I was in my middle school years. And I built a little thing I called the Countdown rocket launcher. It was in a little box you could buy at Radio Shack and had a digital circuit in it and it had a display that would count from 10 down to 0 and beep every time, and it would actually then essentially give a signal to a transistor to pull enough power through the battery to make an Estes rocket go off. And I actually got a local little hobby shop to sell a few of them. And I think I sold 3. So it didn't make a lot of money, but it was kind of fun. But while I was here at BYU, I started a company called Synergy. And Synergy started out as a smart home product because I really thought that was something I was passionate about. It ended up becoming a media retrieval product to use in universities. And think of this. This is pre-digital video. This is when a hard drive had 20 megs. There were no images on computers. And so but you had media centers at universities full of VCRs and Laserdiscs. There was no DVD back then. And they would actually push carts around to classrooms, and they wanted a way to distribute audio and video around the campuses. And we figured out that we could rack mount all these VCRs and Laserdisc players and then build software that would allow professors to schedule media to go out to a classroom. Then when they showed up at first of all, that morning, the media center would get a load list to know what tapes to put in. And the professor just showed up to the room, got a lockbox out, and pulled out a remote we made, and they could point it at the remote and control that deck across campus. Again, it wasn't using the network to do that. The stuff you guys are used to, where everything's just on YouTube, it is a totally different world. But it worked well. We built it up to a decent amount of revenue and sold it eventually. And I sold it just as I was graduating from the school here. But I'll tell you what, it was a total false start. When I first started the company, it was with another BYU student, and it was a smart home product. And we actually put it in a couple of people's house, and I tested it, and I showed it to some HVAC contractors and electricians and some builders. And knowing what I know now, if I had walked in and seen that kid offering what he was offering, I would have run away too. I had no idea what a channel was or what distribution was or how things were sold or how things got to market. I thought if you build something that works, you can find someone who could be a potential customer, and it was done. But no builder knew how to take what I was doing and turn it into something he could put in a house and would trust that and do that. I didn't even know there was a thing called a channel. I didn't know about markets. I didn't understand that you had to look at customers and understand things. And the biggest issue is my main focus was on what rather than why. And I think that's a big issue. And engineers especially do that. You find a technology you think is really cool, and so you decide to build a company around the technology. And companies that are successful are never that. Companies that are really successful are people that find a solution to a problem. They have a problem they know exists. They figure out a solution to that problem. If they figure out a good one, they take it to market, and that's what really works. And my biggest mistake then was I just thought this was cool. I wanted to be Captain Kirk sitting in my seat controlling my house. And instead, I built something that didn't make any sense. So in 1995, I started another company in the smart home space called FAST. I hated that name. It stands for Practical Home Automation Systems Technologies. My business partner, my longtime business partner, came up with that. I wanted to call it Ensemble because I thought it brought things together and had a nicer name. But when we did a trademark search, someone else in the industry was using it and we couldn't. But it was designed for homes. Before that, all the smart home products in the world were designed for boardrooms and they were just being used in homes. It introduced the first drag-and-drop software back then that made programming easy for homes, so it was fairly easy to configure your house. And by the way, when I'm talking about a smart home, I'm talking about when all the devices work together in your home. So people have been doing this in rich homes for a long time, where you have a button in your bedroom that you push and it turns off all the lights and closes the blinds and arms the security system and locks the doors and tells you if the garage is open, makes sure your appliances are off, shuts off all your AV. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Having the ability to have your alarm clock be the thermostat going to the set point in the morning and coming up so that it's warm by the time you get out of bed, and having music play or the TV turn on and the blinds open. It's things like having your house give you reminders when it's time to take out the garbage, or acting like someone's home when you're not there. That's what I think about smart home, and most of my career has been in the smart home space. But this it played pretty well. We built it in just 18 months to $36 million in revenue. It was our run rate, $3 million a month. We turned around and sold it, and it worked pretty well. But this time, here's the deal. We built the right product. We really got the marketing right. We knew the channel to sell it to. We knew who did these kinds of things. Jim Trent here from the engineering school actually was my manufacturer that built all the products for me. Actually, I got to know him back then. We did really well, but I had no idea the complexity of building reliable hardware and problems. You're the one that solved my problems. My biggest problem is I had no idea what that really took. When we first started doing it, we were doing final assembly ourselves in our warehouse. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't even know that was something hard. I thought if you could engineer something and build one, you just do it a whole bunch of times and you can do it. And I had no idea how hard that was. And what I would have done better is I should have either hired someone or outsourced it at the very beginning so I didn't have all those problems, because it was extraordinarily painful to get that actually working. It was more difficult than you can imagine. So then I started this company, iBond. The dean talked about that a minute ago. You guys are all too young to remember, but when the internet first started, the way you got to the internet when you were at home or almost anywhere is you connected to your phone line and your computer dialed a phone number and then made sounds across the wire to make it work. And I'm sure you've seen it in movies, even though you might not be old enough to remember it. And at the time, early on, you'd get about a 4,000 bit per second connection. You might get a 9600 bit, a 9.6 kilobit connection, which again, if you're not a math guy, that's like, what, 1/100th of a megabit. Then we eventually got to where you could get 56K. You could actually get 56 kilobits per second, which is still 1/20th of a single megabit. If you have 1 megabit internet at home right now, are you pretty happy? Probably not. Now the beauty is most of the websites you went to were also designed for that. They were mostly text with maybe some very small images, so they could actually come in that fast. Email was a lot lighter, it didn't have all the big attachments. Documents were smaller, so it did work. But we figured out that companies were starting to put T1 lines into their office, which, by the way, was a big whopping 1.5 megabits and cost about $3,000 a month. But still, companies would do that so they could get there. We thought, business travelers would be willing to pay $10 a night to be able to get the internet in a hotel room and get a fast connection. So we'd bring a single T1 line, a single 1.5 megabit connection into the room, and we'd share it with all the rooms using DSL up to the guest rooms. And then we'd force them to a redirect on the page, and we'd charge them. In the early days, we even had to use Ethernet because there was no Wi-Fi. Back in 1998, Wi-Fi didn't exist, so you had to do that. And in the end, we just ended up doing hundreds of thousands of rooms, and we grew it to a very big thing. Remember, this is even older slide that I did way back. But let me talk about some things. In this company, we were much better. We knew the market. We kind of understood how that got out there. We knew that we just had to sell to the big hotel chains, and if we got them, we'd be successful. We really worked for designing the best customer experience, and I'm going to talk about that real quick, because that's where I made one of my biggest mistakes. So when we first did this, when you'd walk into the hotel room, you had to plug into the actual cable. You had to plug an Ethernet cable into the box. And you guys are engineers. How many of you know what DHCP is versus a static IP address? Right. So back in that day, DHCP did exist, but most people didn't have the internet on their computers or on their laptops set to their Ethernet because they used dial-up for their internet. And so the way corporate IT departments would deal with managing laptops and managing devices and even managing security and firewalling of their networks is they do a static, non-routable IP address on every laptop, and then they'd have them go through a proxy server to the internet. The challenge here is when you plug a laptop into that, and I wouldn't do this to business school guys, but you guys might understand it a little better. If you plug your laptop in, DHCP, here's the difference. DHCP goes to the network and asks for an address. It says, hey, I need an address. Can you give me one? And it gives you one. If you have a static IP address, it assumes the network is going to be there, and most people don't do that very often. But that's how it worked in almost nobody's laptops. Like 98% of all business travelers, their laptops had a static IP address on the Ethernet port on the laptop. And so it just wouldn't work. And we kept talking about what's the ideal customer experience. And I said, well, yeah, it'd be great if my business partner kept saying, it just needs to work. You just need to plug it in and it works. I said, yeah, but that's not how the internet works. You have to have an address that's routable on the network that you're on, and that's just not how it works. And he says, no, but that's the ideal experience. And I said, that's great. And we had one competitor out there, and what they did is had a floppy disk. By the way, all laptops had floppy disks back then, and you could stick it in the side, and it would change your settings to DHCP, and then hopefully change them back so you went back to work, they worked. So anyway, we kept doing that. So we were doing a similar thing, but we went to a trade show, and we'd split up for some different meetings at this trade show, but we met for lunch, and my business partner came back to me and said, I just talked to a company, and they said that they can make the laptop work even if the network settings aren't right. I'm like, what? He says, yeah, they said they can make it work. You don't have to change it to DHCP. I'm like, really? And I literally pulled out a napkin, and I pulled a pen out of my backpack, and I just kind of sat there, and I said, I know how to do it. And I actually went back, and I actually went back to the lab the next day, and by the way, I went to that company later, and in the end, to solve that problem, there were about 5 different things you had to do to make that really work. They'd only solved one of them. But I went back to the lab, figured it out, put it in a test, figured it out, and within a couple days had it working. And I have like 17 patents around this issue right here. And it actually made our company far more successful. We made it so no matter what your laptop settings, even if they were going through proxy servers, it just worked. And I've got a lot of intellectual property around that. But what I think is interesting, and this is one of the biggest lessons of my life, is what changed from that morning to right after lunch? Just one thing changed. I stopped saying it wasn't possible and believed it was, right? As soon as I stopped saying it wasn't possible and believed it was, I did it. I solved it in like 5 minutes. When I just stopped saying that's not how it works, when I heard that someone else could do it, I believed I could do it and I did it. That makes a big difference. You'll be way more successful if you go into things not saying no or saying that's just not how it works, but trying to say how maybe can we make it work? Well, if this is the ideal experience, how do we do it? We also made some other mistakes, like how to measure the business. We made some big mistakes. I think these are fun slides just because I like to show them. But if you look up here, I'm going to see if this works, but do you see those dips and those there and there? So we were measuring our business, just what percentage of guest rooms that were occupied were using our service every night. So this is clear back in March of 2000. And going up, by the way, this is Memorial Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Right? You can see there's Memorial Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas. You see that right there? That's 9/11. People were stuck in hotel rooms and everyone was getting online. Isn't that kind of interesting? That one day, that's 9/11, we had this huge spike in our usage right there. Now, the truth is this line as percentage of total hotel rooms dropped precipitously right there. But as a percentage of occupied rooms, it actually started climbing faster. So we were measuring this all day long because we figured out once we got to 1.5% take rate, we would be profitable in every hotel, and we were very excited about it. But what we weren't watching was this. This is what another chart we did, and we've learned to watch this, but we didn't learn to watch this till we were clear out here. But this is our tech support call to purchase ratio. It was 70%. 70% of all people that were buying, for every person that bought our service, for every 10 people bought our service, 7 were calling our tech support line. And we sold it for $10 a night. We gave the hotel $1 of that. We had some other operating costs for sure. And we were giving $7 back to our support guys. And we weren't watching that, but all of a sudden it started to eat us alive, and we saw that. So we said, we need to start measuring this. And this became a much better measure. And by the way, when we started measuring it, brought it down. But right here is when we did another firmware release, but we still weren't measuring this because we didn't start measuring it out here. And look how long, it took us almost 6 weeks to figure out we had something wrong that was causing connectivity problems. By the way, it happened here again, and we figured it out very quickly. And so measuring your business, knowing what to look for, that's another thing I didn't know to look at. I didn't really realize that was a big thing, but it really does matter. Figuring out the right metrics. Even in an engineering team, what's the metric for an engineering team? What's the metrics for a marketing team? What's the metrics? Sales teams are pretty easy. Sell stuff, but how to scale that might be different. So then in 2003, I started a company called Control4. If you've been in a high-end Parade of Homes home, you might have gone to homes that have these touchscreens on the wall that run all the audio and video and the blinds and everything. We became the very dominant player around the world in this high-end smart home. It's typically only multi-million-dollar homes, but a very big player in that space. I started it in 2003. I got to take it public August 2nd, 2013. We got to go ring the bell on the NASDAQ. Every MBA student, that's their holy grail. Like if they can eventually ring the bell on the NASDAQ, that's the thing you want to do. That's the gold ring for an entrepreneur. We were fortunate enough to get there and do that. I grew it to north of $700 million in annual revenue before I left. It's now north of $1 billion in revenue. But we built everything. This is 2003. There was no Internet of Things. There was none of that. We had to literally design thermostats and light switches and all kinds of different products. But we made a lot of mistakes, and the biggest one was not enough focus. Because of what we were doing, lots of people were coming at us, and we just got distracted left and right, and we're chasing all kinds of things. There was a point that a lot of public utilities were coming after us, and they said they wanted a little smart thing so they could do energy management. And they started throwing kind of big volumes at us, so we opened a division in Silicon Valley that would do that. And we had a bunch of hotels that wanted to put us stuff in hotel rooms, so we built a hospitality division. And then Comcast came to us and said they wanted us to build them a security system that they could use in all their homes. And so we started looking at that. And then Sony came to us and said, we'd like you to build that software that you're doing so we can have it inside our receivers and our TVs. And before you knew it, we got so distracted that we really did kind of struggle a bit. It took us a couple of years extra to get to profitability than we were planning on. And we frankly reduced our growth in the main markets because we were focused on all these other side markets that some of them never brought us any business. And that's another thing that's a lesson is if you do something well, make sure you don't neglect that thing you're doing really well just to look at other things that look fun. So today, I have a company called OliverIQ. You've probably never heard of it, except for maybe seeing that I'm going to be here. But we started this in 2020, and it's smart home as a service, and we sell it through internet service providers and builders and retailers, and we felt like there are lots of IoT devices out there. I mean, probably most of you, how many of you have at least a Ring or a Nest thermostat or a smart camera in your home or some smart light bulbs or even in your parents' home, or everyone does, right? We all do. Do you have an Alexa or a Google speaker? Almost everybody has one of those, right? And you can even make them work together. Most of us have these Internet of Things devices. They are all over the place. We have them. The challenge is just having a device with an app on your phone is not really a smart home. Things aren't working together. And that makes a big difference is whether your devices work together or just are independent things. And so we started this company to deal with this kind of thing. I'm going to show you a little video. One of the things we think is really interesting is we're in this world of AI now that's very different than what we've had in the past. With large language models and some of these things that can understand what people say, we can do a lot of really new things. And if you actually ask Gemini or ChatGPT what the most important interface for AI is going to be, most of them will list cars, phones, office, and home. They'll list those 4 things as the 4 things that that AI will matter for. All 4 of those are the places they go. Home is number 1 or number 2 in all of them. We are going to interact with our homes, we're going to talk to our homes, and our homes are going to do what we want them to do and help us. And so I'm going to show you a video we've just done for OliverIQ that talks about that a little bit.
that understands and performs your voice commands.
Hello, how can I help?
Turn on my hallway lights.
The hallway lights are now on.
With Ollie, simple voice commands control your home with ease.
Ollie, turn on the fireplace.
The fireplace is now on.
Ollie makes control seamless, whether you're in Paris, Salt Lake City, or anywhere else in the world.
Oli, allume les lumières.
Lumière allumée.
Oli, baja la temperatura 2 grados.
He bajado la temperatura 2 grados.
Imagine being able to control every aspect of your home environment, even when you're away.
Ollie, tell me when my son gets home and send me a notification if he brings friends home.
Alex arrived at home at 2:43 p.m. and he has 2 friends with him.
Has the dog been let out?
Max went out at 2:50 p.m.
Ollie, notify me anytime the garage has been open for 30 minutes.
I've created an experience called Garage Open Warning.
Creating a truly smart home is more than simple device control. It requires a foundation built on OliverIQ's complete smart home platform. Ollie takes automation to a new level, making smart home setup easy, even for beginners. It automates device discovery and integration, so homeowners can set up complex experiences with natural language commands in minutes. It's time to wind down.
Ollie, I want a good night scene that dims the lights, turns down the thermostat, turns off the fireplace, closes the blinds, arms the security system, and locks the doors.
I've created an experience for you called Good Night.
Enjoy a worry-free good night's rest. Homeowners can integrate any of the latest smart devices in their intelligent home with Ollie's help.
Ollie, how do I connect my Lutron smart switch to my system?
To connect your Lutron smart switch to the OliverIQ system, 1. Go to the Devices section in the OliverIQ app.
For more complex issues, Ollie can hand off the conversation to a live support agent.
Ollie, play jazz.
Playing jazz.
Ollie, lock the doors.
Locking doors.
Ollie, turn on the lights.
Lights on.
Control, automation, and support are the foundations for the AI-driven home of the future. Ollie isn't just another smart home assistant. He's always on, and your partner in creating an intelligent home that's safer, more comfortable, and tailored to your needs. At OliverIQ, we've been at the forefront of smart home technology for decades. We're leveraging that experience to deliver smart home as a service, powered by AI.
All right, so that's what I'm doing now. I don't know all the mistakes I've made at this company yet. I'm sure I'm making a lot of them right now. Maybe even showing you this video before we've actually released all of those features. We actually are releasing, a lot of those features already are there, but there's a few of them, like knowing where the keys are by looking at cameras. That's coming out in January. But let me just talk about what I've done right in my career. And I've talked about a lot of the mistakes I've made and a lot of things, but what I did right, one thing I did what I loved. And I think that can get taken too far. If you truly just follow your passion, I think that's a little scary. Sometimes you do need to make a living if you want to have a family and stuff, so you got to be a little careful about that. But doing something you're really interested in doing and doing something you really enjoy really does matter, and it matters a lot. Does anyone know the big thing that happened in June of 1979? I think in June of 1979, everyone didn't know this was such a big thing, but it was a very big thing. Anyone by any chance know what happened? Most of you weren't born. Most of you, even your parents, were very, very young. The Apple II came out. That was the first personal computer that you could actually have in your home that was really broad market accessible. And I was fortunate enough, I went to a school that had in my middle school, I don't know if it's the same way today, but in my middle school, when you were in 7th grade, you had to take either home ec or wood shop. You had to take one of those two things. And you had to choose. And guys who took home ec were not kind of treated very well. I think the world's nicer now. And I would have rather cooked than cut wood, honestly. Especially there was a metal part of it. Metal shop too. We had to bend sheet metal, learn how to make HVAC ducting. And that didn't seem interesting to me at all. But I also didn't want to be the one guy in the sewing and cooking class. And But it ends up a science teacher decided to create a class called Mind Benders. And it was the nerdiest kids in the whole school, but only like 20 of them that did it, but I took Mind Benders. And the Apple II came out, and she had this idea that we could maybe do a fundraiser to get one into our school. This is before school started putting computers in kind of normally. And so we got one. And I loved this thing. My very first Christmas, I asked my parents, I said, I want the Apple II Programmer's Reference Guide, so I'll know all the stuff on how to do things in it. And that's what I got for Christmas one year. And it made a huge difference in my life. I learned everything about it. I learned how to program everything, and I got really into it, and I just loved it. Because of that, my dad's brother, who was an electrical engineer, said, I'll teach you how to build a computer, sent me a bunch of chips for Christmas, and I went up to his house and learned how to build my own computer. And I learned a lot about this stuff, and I just became super passionate about it. Up until that point, I planned to be an architect. And I thought, I'm going to be an electrical engineer, I'm going to go to BYU, and I'm going to go to electrical engineering, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to build computers and do stuff. And it's taken me through all these, because I did something I really liked. And the reason it's important to do something you really love is the perseverance. I mean, there will always be times where things get hard. As a matter of fact, I can name a time in every business I've started where everything looked like we were going to fail. I mean, absolutely, there's no way we're going to get past this. When we installed the first hotel for Marriott, they said, you go install this hotel. If it goes smoothly, and we talk to the general manager, then we'll be able to move you on to the next stage to do another hotel trial. But the guest experience and you not disrupting guests is the most important thing in the world. So we're going to call them after you're done. They had us deploy the Salt Lake City Marriott right before BrainShare, which was Novell's big conference at that time. And the general manager sat with us before we did the install. He says, the most important thing is not disrupt the guests. I don't want you going into the guest rooms more than one time. Well, when we got on site for that first hotel, we found there was crosstalk between our lines in the hotel, the way they were wired, and we didn't know about that. And I had to rebuild the firmware on individual chips that had to be replaced in every single box in every single room 7 times. So we entered every room 8 times. And we literally went into all 530 rooms of the downtown Salt Lake City Marriott 8 times, and it was just a disaster. Now, in the end, it actually ran, and the guests thought it was the best thing because it's the first time they'd ever seen anything like that, where they could just plug their laptop into this hotel, and it just worked, and they had high-speed connection, and it got a lot of fanfare. But we knew when that call to that general manager came from Bethesda, Maryland, where Marriott headquarters was, we're going to be in trouble. And we're just kind of waiting for that phone call because the guys from headquarters were going to call us after they talked. And we knew it was happening that day at 1 o'clock. And we get the phone call and they says, well, congratulations. The general manager said it's the most seamless integration of technology he's ever seen in his entire career. And I'm like, that's not what I remember. It was very different for me. But it gets you through the hard times. There was a moment where I had been at that hotel for 5 days straight without sleeping. My wife brought all the kids over to the mall that was next door, and we sat and had lunch together, and I thought, I should just go home with you guys. This is pointless. But if you love what you do, you're going to make it through those hard times, and they always come, and you just got to power through them or else you won't be successful. By the way, the ways I lucked out, first of all, I have an amazingly tolerant wife who's actually really smart and has helped me through all of this, and has known about all of it all along, what I'm doing, and has been very involved and very interested, and made it possible. I was just saying earlier, in 2001 when I was doing IBON, I had to go to Asia 13 times and Europe 8 times in that one calendar year. I was on the road all the time. And we have 7 kids. I would not have been able to do that if she weren't super tolerant and super helpful and super interested in what we were doing. The other one was the guy I talked about before, the first guy that believed in me. He was a really smart guy, but he also had money. That's sometimes the hardest thing to do. I kind of just lucked out that I ran into this guy that had money and was willing to help fund me. But the next thing is, that was back when I didn't understand the channels and things, and neither did he. But in the process, I met another guy about 33 years ago who actually did understand that. He had a Wharton MBA. He had been the brand manager for Tide at Procter & Gamble, and we got together, and we've been together for 33 years through all our companies. We're co-founders of each company. That never happens either. It's very rare to see 2 guys build a company that's big and stay together in the next company. But he's just unwavering ethics and persistence. He's patient. He works well. We've figured out what each of us does in our businesses, and it's been a fantastic partnership. Also, a great group of guys have been with me through all these businesses. Like, just same employees come back over and over again and want to work with us. And when you have a team that you know what you do and you trust each other completely, you can move a lot faster. Stephen Covey's last book was a book about how business is faster when you can actually trust people. I think it's called Business at the Speed of Trust or something like that. So the benefits of being an entrepreneur, I'm going to make a pitch here. There was a student here in the school 6 years ago or 7 years ago named Tanner Johnston who wrote an article about how not enough engineering students want to be entrepreneurs. And in Utah, most of the companies are started by MBAs. And whereas in Silicon Valley, it tends to be very deep tech people who start companies, like your Sergey Brins and Larry Pages and Mark Zuckerbergs and those kinds of things. Even Steve Wozniaks and Steve Jobs were both techies, really. I mean, there's a lot of great things. You get to control your work life and do every day. You get to make big decisions. You get to choose who you work with. If you're successful, you get lots of fulfillment, and you often can make a lot of money. And those are all good things. The downsides are also very big, though, because success or failure depends on you. Work can consume you, and you've got to figure that out. If you make the wrong decisions, you don't just end up in a lot of debt and leave people, but you leave people without jobs. I once at IBON had to lay off 500 people in one day, a week before Christmas. That was really hard. The stress of making payroll when times are lean, and the paychecks don't come to you if you're not able to pay the other people, so it only comes when you're successful. And you don't have a boss, but the truth is every one of your customers is your boss, and your investors are your boss, so you still have a boss. So it's not perfect. But one final note I want to say, Steve Jobs is famous for saying, there's no such thing as a work-life balance. And I just think he's fundamentally wrong. I think he's absolutely fundamentally wrong. And as a member of a church, I absolutely disagree. And if you don't strive for a work-life balance, you'll find yourself at your end of your life having a life you maybe weren't so excited about living. I look around. I've been in this tech industry for 35 years. I know most of these Silicon Slope CEOs, especially the older ones that have been around for a while. We're all friends. We've all done it. And I watch the different lives they lead. And sometimes when you get more successful, things get challenging. But the ones who stick to the church and stick to the gospel and stick to their testimony are the ones that at least appear to me to have much happier lives and seem to have things going better for them. And find the time to nurture your family, your faith, your health, and your mind. Find the time to do that. Find time to serve in the church and in your community. I've tried to do both. My wife and I started kind of the charter school movement here in Utah and a couple of the charter schools that people know about, and we've spent a lot of time on that, and we care about that. I've been able to serve in the church. I've been serving with YNSAs for 9.5 years, and I just love it. I think it's one of my favorite things. But find time to nurture your faith. As a matter of fact, I have a little quote here. Let me just pull it up. In 2022, President Nelson said, I plead with you to take charge of your testimony of Jesus Christ. Work for it, own it, care for it, nurture it so that it will grow. Then watch the miracles happen in your life. You will have a better life if you focus on it. And I know, I've been a YSA bishop. I know just based on the rules of numbers, based on how many people are in this room, that some of you are struggling right now with your testimony. That you're not sure whether you're going to keep going to church when you get out of BYU. There's definitely people in this room that are feeling that way. I would argue that now is a better time than almost any to firm that up. If you're not certain, read Alma 32, read about the seed, do an experiment, find out if it's true for yourself. It can make a big difference for you. I know I've done it, and I know it's made all the difference for me in my career and in my life, and I'm so grateful to have been able to have that be part of the way I do things. And I, frankly, am pretty open about sharing that I'm a member of the church as I travel around the world and talk to people. All my Jewish friends know that I've always invited them to come to Utah because it's one place they can be a Gentile. And I said, why don't you come out and visit us here in Utah? You can be a Gentile at least in one place and do that. But take the time to do that. But that's where I have. That's what I have. So, thank you.